Urgent, immediate. In the pitch black of the Kuwaiti desert, armored columns advanced under heavy fire. Explosions shattered the horizon, and soldiers watched as their vehicles were torn apart by incoming missiles. Back home, cable news networks broadcasted a specific narrative of Operation Desert Storm, a flawless, sterile conflict defined by laser-guided munitions and omniscient command centers. The public watched a war that appeared perfectly calculated and mathematically precise. But the explosive flashes tearing through the desert darkness weren't coming from the Iraqi military. American and British forces were firing on their own troops. This DuPois Institute document calculates the true toll. Almost 23% of Desert Storm battle casualties came by our own hand. Historically, friendly fire accounted for roughly 2% of combat deaths. The Gulf War multiplied that rate by 11. These deaths were the predictable collapse of the target identification stack. The target identification stack is the three-layered military process of sensor fidelity, timing, and human cognitive load management. When you push a massive mechanized force to hyper-accelerated speeds, that stack breaks down. The root of this breakdown is kinematic friction. In modern, high-intensity armored warfare, the physical positions of tanks and infantry change much faster than a command post can track them. This animation tracks the resulting spatial latency gap. We see fast-moving blue unit icons representing Allied forces swarming across a grid. Because they bypassed Iraqi defensive pockets rather than forming a static trench line, the traditional front line disintegrates entirely. The map boundaries simply update too slowly to contain the troops. Look specifically at the path of the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment. Advancing blindly through the night of February 26th, their blue icons blow right past their checkpoints and cross a clearly marked red dashed line labeled the 50 east-west boundary, entering an entirely new sector without authorization. They push directly into the Battle of Phase Line Bullet. Navigating through unfamiliar desert terrain in total darkness and driving rain, unit commanders completely lost their geographical bearings. This timeline records the fatal overlap. Looking at the cluster of events on the morning of February 27th, between 3 o'clock and 3:20 a.m., the out-of-position 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment engaged American engineers and Bradley fighting vehicles that were parked waiting for vehicle recovery. One U.S. corporal was killed, and another soldier was wounded. When the physical speed of an invasion outpaces the military's digital mapping cycle, the map lies to the soldiers on the ground. Designated safe zones instantly and invisibly become fatal kill boxes. The air war suffered from a parallel collapse. The Tactical Air Control Center carried the immense structural burden of deconflicting thousands of combat sorties simultaneously, ensuring jets and ground troops didn't occupy the same airspace. This flowchart visualizes the data linkage latency, the communication delay inherent in the system. To pass target coordinates, information has to make 4 distinct communication hops, from a ground commander to a forward air controller, up to the air control center, and finally down to the pilot in the cockpit. Watch how the mathematical error rate compounds at each node.
Even if there is a 90% probability of coordinate accuracy at the initial source, multiplying that probability across 4 separate radio hops degrades the final confidence to just 65% by the time the data reaches the pilot. This degradation causes boundary drift. Because the ground units move faster than the air tasking order can update, commanders frequently draw massive, unrestricted attack zones directly over shifting friendly positions based on outdated, low-confidence coordinates. That specific data failure killed 9 British soldiers. Due to a coordinate mismatch passed through these degraded channels, 2 American A-10 Thunderbolt pilots fired Maverick missiles into a pair of stationary British Warrior armored vehicles. The layered communication protocols designed to verify targets and prevent errors geometrically increased the probability of striking friendly forces. Every layer of safety introduced a new layer of latency. Once a pilot arrived at those flawed coordinates, their hardware severely limited their vision. A-10 pilots guiding Maverick missiles at high speeds had to rely on grainy, low-resolution black and white camera feeds to distinguish friend from foe. This photograph shows the atmospheric degradation the pilots were flying through. Retreating Iraqi forces set hundreds of Kuwaiti oil wells on fire, pumping thick plumes of dark smoke and particulate matter into the sky. This dense smog scattered laser designators and completely obscured physical vision. This simulated thermal scope footage demonstrates thermal crossover. Thermal crossover is a condition at dawn and dusk where the ambient temperature of the desert neutralizes the heat signatures of metal vehicles. Through a green-tinted thermal lens, the geometric silhouette of an Allied British warrior and an Iraqi T-72 tank look absolutely identical, blending into the background. This created an electronic recognition asymmetry. While coalition aircraft carried digital transponders to identify themselves to radar as friendly, ground vehicles lacked any automated identification, friend or foe. They relied entirely on analog fluorescent panels that were invisible through the smoke and thermal lenses. The coalition built a brilliantly interconnected digital network to dominate the skies, but they left their ground troops reliant on analog eyesight in a visually ruined environment. This graphic weighs the cost function of combat identification. The military institution struggled to process this deliberate calculus. A Government Accountability Office investigation later revealed that commanders submitted misleading statements to mask fratricide incidents, even awarding valor medals based on fictional accounts of enemy engagements. The 1991 operations in Kuwait prove the sterile, perfectly targeted war is an illusion. As long as human cognition remains the primary processor in hyperspeed combat, the deadly friction of friendly fire is a mathematical certainty.